Hello to friends and family of St. John Baptist Church. I'm Reverend Ricky Harvey, and I'm excited to host Dr. Rhea Cragen and Kelly Kessler in a conversation tonight about COVID-19 and kids. As you all come in, I'm excited just to see you. We will give you an opportunity to join this live stream. If you're watching the replay, thank you for viewing this. There is so much information that is widely spread in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine, and so much information is available. But I'm excited that professionals are here to help us and guide us with information that will be useful in how children can approach the COVID-19 vaccine. Once you come in, I see you entering the room. Will you just say hello in the chat section? Just greet us. Help us to build an audience. Click the share button because there is some rich information that's going to be shared with all of us tonight. And we want to be sure that our kids, the children in our community, have access to the most recent, up-to-date, accurate information about COVID-19. Listen, if you don't know, the COVID-19 it's still a reality. The pandemic is real, and we're glad that you're here. Please greet us, and we're excited again to introduce Dr. Cragen and Kelly Kessler, who are here. And I'm excited because there's information for us to grasp. Even Scripture says that people can perish for the lack of knowledge. And I'm excited because there is knowledge coming into our space. We see you all coming in. Francine Pratt, hello. Thank you all for being here. And we're excited that you're joining us. I want to, without any further ado, I want to give it over to our guest lecturers today who are going to lead us. We're excited. Listen, ask questions in the comment section, give responses and replies in the comment section. We assure you, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, that our experts are going to be able to help us to know more and do better in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine and children. Will you two go ahead and take it away? And again, thank you so much for leading our conversation tonight.
Well, I guess I'll get started. I'm Dr. Rhea Cragen, board certified physician. I've been practicing about 30 years. I have a long history with St. John. I was baptized there and I was married there. And so it gives me great joy, and I appreciate you, Reverend Ricky, and Pastor Turner for inviting me once again to come help share information. We're going to talk about the vaccines in children, and we love our children. I have two of my own, and we pray for our children. We love them. We hope for them, and we protect them. And that's one of the things that the vaccine helps to do. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and we'll get us started.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cragen. So my name is Kelly Kessler, and I am the Bureau Director for Population Health at the Howard County Health Department. And I also just, want to say thank you so much to St. John for the graciousness with which you've hosted us and all the work that you have done during the COVID-19 response in our community. I mean, it's definitely extended beyond the walls of the church. And certainly that we haven't been able to be inside many of our faith communities during this time. You have not stopped. I think it'll be amazing when everybody gets back together to really reflect on all of the work that has been done in the St. John community. So we do want to share a lot. And as Dr. Cragen said, this particular session, it's the third session. And when we met, like a month ago, we talked about where we hoped we would be now, and we are. So that's pretty exciting that we're here. And I as well have, three of my own kids, different places, an adult child at 21, and then two middle schoolers. I have always been somebody who believed that the Lord has a sense of humor among many things that the Lord does. And I used to teach middle school, and I stopped teaching middle school when my oldest was a toddler, because I thought to myself that it would be really hard to be a middle school educator and have middle school student of my own. And I was finishing my master's degree, and fast forward to many, many years later, and here I am in the middle of a global pandemic, virtually schooling a 7th grader and an 8th grader. And I say to myself that that the Lord has a sense of humor, and said, nope, you were meant to be teaching one way or the other. So here we are, and here we've been. But I want to just provide a quick update to everyone. And I want to celebrate a lot of things, but before I share some of the really good news, I do really want to pause and reflect for a moment. In fact, actually, this number, the 239, has increased to 242 of our Howard County neighbors that have perished in this past year due to COVID-19. Today is a difficult anniversary for our community in a lot of ways, beyond the walls of COVID. But I do want to ask everyone that's joining us tonight just to take a few minutes and, reflect. But I'm actually going to pause here for just about 10 seconds. I'd like to really just honor the lives of our friends and our neighbors and our family members here in Howard County, but also those that we haven't been able to be with or to say goodbye to. So I'm just going to pause and ask everybody to kind of center themselves and reflect in honor of those lives. Thank you, everybody. I think it's so powerful, as I said, to be within the faith community talking about what COVID has done. Before this session started, we were actually talking about being able to reflect on many of the good things that have come out of this experience. And I hope and pray for all of us that we are able to do that. I want to focus a minute on some of the exciting news, which is to say that Howard County, I think I will say I'm a little competitive, maybe being from Howard County, that 76.7% of Howard County residents 12 and up have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. 63.5% of our residents are fully vaccinated. That is incredibly exciting news. Our positivity rate is at 1%, and that is the lowest it's been since we actually started recording positivity rate. So that is also very exciting. What I want to just re-emphasize to folks, though, is we still have to stay vigilant. I know it's exciting. The world seems to be reopening. We're making some positive strides. We've seen changes in masking regulations and some other things, but we really have to stay vigilant. And I just want to take a second and let everybody know that testing is still one of the resources that we have available to us in the community. We have mobile testing sites that are available throughout Howard County. We also have the Azova testing that's available at the health department. And I believe that will be available within the St. John community as well. And for those of you that are, a little more inclined to prefer to maybe do the saliva-based testing, sorry for the graphicness, it's sort of the spit on a stick versus the, nasal swab that are the other COVID testing. There are lots of options. And so we encourage you to keep being tested, especially, if you plan to travel, if you are not, if you're experiencing symptoms. These are all valuable things, and the resources are available to us in the community. And we don't necessarily know when we will reach herd immunity per se, but we know that we need a certain percentage of people to have protection to really offer the greatest protection. And Dr. Cragen, I know you shared this at the last time we met, but I know that there are probably folks who weren't with us in that call. I love how you sort of describe your circle analogy. Would you mind sharing that with everybody just to real quickly kind of give people an idea of what herd immunity actually is?
Sure. Herd immunity is protecting those who cannot either get the vaccine or they don't respond to the vaccine well because they have an autoimmune disease or they have an allergy to the vaccine and they can't take it. But if you think about 10 chairs arranged in a circle, and then you have a person standing in the middle of that circle, and each of the chairs has a person in it. And then, so you have your 10 chairs, the person in the middle, and then somebody walks into the room who has COVID-19. And all of the people in the chairs are vaccinated. And the person who has COVID-19 is on the outside. So the person in the middle is protected, as in herd immunity. There's a herd of people around them, and the person with COVID-19 can't get to the person who's in the middle of the circle. And so that person is protected from COVID-19. And that's it.
Thank you. One question did come in, and I mentioned the 2 types of testing. And, I know that there's still lots of questions, even though we're going to talk specifically about kids. But the 2 different tests that we mentioned, are they all equally sensitive, or is there one that's sort of considered the gold standard per se?
The ones that you guys carry at the health service are equally sensitive, but the PCR test, the one with the nasal swab, if you don't know, kind of, somebody's sending you a link to say, get your home test, or somebody is, you're out and about and you're not quite sure which test to get. A PCR test where they take the little brush and put it in your nose is probably the best test to get, because you kind of know that it is standardized, and having that assurity is a good thing.
Thank you. And I do want to mention just the Azova kits that I had shared. We also, those are the same kits that, for those of you who are parents who have children, the public school system may have asked for a waiver to be signed in order for the testing to take place. It's the Azova Test Kit. So they are not actually doing the nasal swab for your student. They will be doing the Azova saliva-based.
Yes, the saliva-based tests are good too. But it is useful to have them. Eventually, the home-based kits are going to be easily accessible to everyone, but you just have to be careful where you get them from. So.
Right. And the test kits, the Azova kits that we have currently, there are no charges for that, just so everyone is aware if you are using them. I know some of the home-based tests, if you go to purchase them, they can actually be pretty expensive. But the saliva-based tests that we're using for students through the public schools, as well as what we're using through the health department, there is no cost for that. So just a quick note in terms of some of the things that we're still working on in the county. I also, before we really jump into talking about kids specifically, which I know is what a lot of people have questions about, it's the when and where can I be vaccinated? And it's amazing when we think about the first session we came together to the last session to where we are now, how times have changed, right? There was actually a release today that went out that our Howard County mall mass vac site is leading the state in vaccines. So kudos to Howard County and to our surrounding neighbors, and to the folks working to operate that mass vaccination site. There are several sites that are available through the state mass vaccination. And if you wanted to find out or make an appointment through that, we have the number up there, and I'll try to put that in the chat as well for folks. The 1-855-MD-GO-VAX number, you can call for assistance or support, and it is actually available in multiple languages. So that is something that's helpful to know. But you can also schedule an appointment, and most of these places actually do have walk-up now. I had a friend who wanted to go ahead and get theirs. They went online, scheduled their appointment, went to the appointment, and came back all within 45 minutes. So I was like, whoa, that was pretty exciting. So the other thing I wanted to share is just that we still do have a number of Howard County clinics. And these are some pictures from the clinic that was held at St. John Baptist. And I know that St. John is working with several partners in terms of being able to provide clinics at home. And so you can visit vaccine.howardcountymd.gov, and that will give you a list of clinic sites. We've actually been doing some pop-up clinics in a variety of apartment complexes, neighborhoods. We actually did one in Elkridge, and we had one in Savage. And interestingly enough, the ice cream man happened to be rolling through the neighborhood, and he stopped and he got his vaccine and then proceeded to ask what apartments we'd be at the rest of the week, and made a lucrative deal out of providing ice cream at the at the vaccine clinic. So we've also been at some restaurants and other places. So we really intend to leave no stone unturned, because we're still finding folks who really have not accessed the vaccine. And to that point, I really want people to know that if you need help, you can call the 410-313-6284, and we have people that will assist you. And if you have friends, family members, children with that need special accommodations, please call us and let us know, and we can work with you to try to make special accommodations to help get folks vaccinated. The other thing that's important is for parents. You don't actually need to bring your child's birth certificate. And so if that's a barrier, because you're like, I don't even know where that birth certificate is, or I have to find it, or I don't want to have to go get it, you don't have to bring your child's birth certificate with you in order for them to be vaccinated. And just a reminder, the vaccine is free. Unfortunately, we are seeing cases of fraud. So if someone is trying to charge you for the COVID vaccine, they should not be charging you for that. And the testing and treatment and vaccination, they're not part of public charge. So for family members or community members that are concerned, they don't need to be that. We want everyone to have the ability to get vaccinated. So we want to talk a bit about safety of COVID vaccine, and a lot of this applies both to all of us as well as to children. And we're going to talk about some specific nuances for kids. But one of the things that a lot of people have asked is this real yet? Because we use this term emergency use authorization. And so many people have had questions about what does that mean? And I just want to preface this by saying that, almost 300 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been administered at this point in time. And they are safe and effective, and they are being held to all of the research standards. And, there have been tens of thousands of participants in clinical trials, and they've gone and continue to undergo very intensive safety monitoring. And we're going to talk about what some of the blips on the radar we've all heard about have been. And it's because of that very intensive safety monitoring.
Yes. And there are people who review them. I'm sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
There are people who are reviewing them, any side effects every week. And, they make reports, and that's how they pick up on some of the very small side effects that have been showing up. So
exactly. So right now, what we are receiving right now are vaccines that have received what is called an emergency use authorization. And so sometimes I've heard misinformation on folks saying, well, it's not even been approved yet. It has received emergency use authorization. And basically what that means is that they are working because of I guess, as we were talking about before, it really comes down to numbers, right? In respect to how many people and the time. And what we found is that there is substantial evidence that the benefits of the drug, the benefits of the vaccine outweigh any risks associated. Dr. Craig, do you want to add anything to that? Because I know that's a question your patients probably ask you.
So it says basically when something gets emergency use approval, it means that it's safe and effective, and that the risks of taking the vaccine are less than the risks of the disease. And the COVID-19, as you know, it's killed over 500,000 of us, and that continues to be the case, and it's both adults and children. So having a wonderful thing in our eventually there'll be medication too, but right now, all we have is the vaccines to do a good job of preventing us from getting sick from COVID-19. And they go through the same studies and they have to prove that it is both safe and effective. And, we have between 70 and 95% effectiveness for all of the vaccines that are approved in the United States.
So I've heard people talk about this, and I've actually had a couple friends who've sort of said like they're worried about their kids, doing 2 doses. And I know that both the Pfizer and the Moderna are approved as 2-dose series, and Pfizer is the only one that's approved right now for 12 and up.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to parents? Because I've had some say, well, what if I just get them half of that? Like, what if I just do 1 dose instead of the 2 doses?
They did studies on the children. About 3,000 kids were studied, and when they did only half the dose, they saw only half the response. And so the protection was only 50 to 60%, which went up to above 90% once they got their second dose. So it's kind of like leaving them only half protected if you only give them one.
Those doses are important. And I know one of the things we've talked about with the health department is we've been very fortunate in Howard County. We have a small percentage of people that have not completed their second dose. But for anybody who maybe had dose 1 and did not have dose 2 for whatever reason, and you are looking to get your second dose, please call us. We can get you set up. Please go to one of our local clinics. We'll get you in for that second dose. Because again, just as Dr. Cregan said, full protection versus half protection.
Protection, not what we're looking for. And we want our kids to be able to get back to doing sports and camps and travel and school. We want them to go back to school.
So I know since we met last, one of the things that happened, I think when we met the last time, J&J was paused. There were some things that happened.
It was reinstated just the day before, I think, our last session. But Johnson & Johnson had a pause. About 30 people out of the
it's like 9 million or something people,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, 9 million. It's more than that now, but every day we're vaccinating more and more. But at least 9 to 10 million people who have received the J&J vaccine. About 30 people, which is a very small number compared to the millions of people that have been vaccinated. But this just goes to show that our monitoring of the side effects is working to bring out these very tiny numbers of people that had difficulty with blood clots, that they needed to be treated. They had blood clots with low platelets and they were having an autoimmune reaction, and they needed to be treated a little differently. So they paused so they could let the doctors know how to treat it differently. They could let the public know to watch out for it. And the side effects would show up a week after, like you're feeling fine, and then a week after you get a headache. Most side effects from the shot come, within hours and only last 1 to 2 days. So if you get symptoms a week out, then that would be something to let your doctor know.
So the thing I see all over social media, I see people with I got vaxxed, I'm fully vaxxed now, as they're like walking out from the second shot or their first shot if it's J&J and they just need the 1. When are we actually fully vaxxed?
2 weeks after your second shot of either the Pfizer and the Moderna, or 2 weeks after the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So you need your immune system to not only recognize and mount an immune response, but to go out and make memory cells so that they can remember what to fight in the future. And if you don't let that time go by, you can go out, even though you're vaccinated, and get infected and take it home to your family. I have a colleague that happened to. And, it was tragic. The whole family went down because they had kids there and they had older people there, and not all of them had been vaccinated at the time. They're doing well now, but they do have, there's one or two of them that have some long COVID symptoms, and that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Long COVID is when the symptoms of COVID don't completely disappear. Like you might continue to have loss of smell and taste, or you might have ongoing headaches, or you might have brain fog where it's difficult to concentrate to the point that you can't go back to work. So these are not insignificant things. You might have lung damage or heart problems or any of those other long-term symptoms of COVID-19, because COVID-19 is a all over the body disease. It affects our blood vessels, a lot of our major organs, and to be avoided if at all possible.
We for our family, we basically we have a shared calendar that we use because it's like who's on first, what's on second, but we put a date and like a countdown, so we actually have it to like when the whole family is officially vaccinated. And kind of did a celebration plan. So we're not all there yet. We still have the two younger two, but we've planned a small art. We all have the secret love for Dairy Queen. I'm not advertising restaurants, but we love our Dairy Queen. So we make our little trip to celebrate special events. So we have it on the calendar already when we are fully vaxxed. So granted, we'll still be sitting outside eating the ice cream, but that's okay. Like we'll be going somewhere for ice cream, which will be like a new thing for us. So we're excited about that for sure. So.
And I also want to say, as we're going along, if anybody has any questions, please type them in the chat and we can answer them as we go along. You don't have to wait to the end.
Definitely. So kids and COVID, I think it's something I think a lot of us have wrestled with. I'll be very transparent and honest and say, even though I am someone who works at the health department, I am very well versed in COVID from a public health perspective. I really had some hesitancy. I had no qualms whatsoever making a decision for myself, but I felt like I needed more information when I was thinking about what I would do for my kids. That's a lot of responsibility when we think about, those young souls that we're charged with and blessed with in protecting and keeping. And so I know that that's something where, people have had a lot of questions. And so we want to kind of like talk a little bit about that. Dr. Craigan, you talked about, kids getting it. And we've heard a lot in respect to like the numbers are going down, but they're going up in young people.
Yes, the numbers are rising in young people. And so far, we've had over 200,000 children hospitalized with COVID-19. It's not talked about much. The general feel is that the kids are fine and they're not going to get terribly sick. And so it's no big deal, except if it's your child. And then it's a very big deal. We've had 583 deaths, mostly from multisystem inflammatory syndrome, where it's a response. Usually they'll get COVID, they'll get better, and then they start a couple of weeks later having symptoms that they have fever and they might get skin peeling and they might feel weak and tired and, just general body aches. And the other thing is the bloodshot eyes is one of the things that makes them look really ill and different than they normally do. It's something that you should take them to be seen. And it's treatable. Basically, it's their immune system on overdrive. And you want to, it's from COVID-19, the disease, when they get it. And you want to have them evaluated because sometimes it can lead to heart disease. and it can be ongoing and lifelong if you don't treat it quickly. So
I think one of the other things I've heard, and I guess, it's true, we probably tend to hear about things in extreme, but over the last couple of days, something else that people have talked about is myocarditis. And I was trying to explain to a family member that the fact that we're hearing about these things is actually like a really good thing, because it means people are watching so closely. I kind of said, now there's no better time than now to get these vaccines, because if anything could possibly happen, someone is watching, they're looking for it, right?
Watching. Every week they're looking at them. But yeah, that one is related to possibly related to getting the vaccine. And it is something that is seen more in male children than female children. And it's something that typically shows up about 4 days after the vaccination, which is also different than just general vaccination. So when you get the shot, usually within hours to 2 days, you usually get the general body aches and fever and, that kind of thing. But this is something that would show up 4 days after getting the shot, or about 4 days to a week. And this is in children. And generally they feel tired. They feel a little bit of shortness of breath. This is typically not life-threatening, but if you treat it, usually with anti-inflammatory steroids, that kind of thing, then all the symptoms resolved. It's basically a immune system response that is just turned up a bit, because young people tend to have robust immune systems. They are really good at fighting off stuff because, they get sick a lot. And so their immune systems are like, we got to go fight it. And so it just causes a little bit of inflammation in the body. And like I said, easily treatable. But if your child gets a little short of breath, a little tired, not their usual self, starts running a fever, diarrhea, and they've been feeling fine after getting their shot, and then they start having new symptoms, that's when you should go and call your pediatrician and go see your doctor.
So I know with children and teens, we've talked about sort of, people that are sort of susceptible or have certain underlying medical conditions. And it sounds like a lot of those same medical conditions that we've heard a lot about for adults are similar to the ones where, we want to be careful with children as well.
Right. So what you're listing on the slides are kids who would be at increased risk if they get COVID-19 of not doing well. The problem with the slide, though, is that for MIS-C, multisystem inflammatory syndrome, we don't know which kids are going to get that. A kid can get it, and it's not a whole lot of people. So, this year since last year, there's been, less than 800 kids who've had it, who've died, or I should say, it's under 500 who've had it. It's under 800 who have died. But there is, it's the kind of thing is that, to watch your children. And if you feel that something's not okay, then go see your doctor.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the other things I think it's really important to talk about with regard to the health of our children is children and mental health. And I think that probably mental health in everyone is definitely, I made a comment to a friend that I felt like I was fading fast. There was a recent article in the New York Times that sort of talked about, just being sort of stuck in this place where you're sort of just, I don't know, I liken it to the hamster wheel. But for kids especially, I think it's really important to think about how, this relates to their overall well-being, right? This has been an incredibly challenging time with the isolation from their friends, from school, from teammates, just not having sort of the freedom to do different things that they want to do. Sometimes a little too much freedom. I think, I don't know, I've definitely seen some scary virtual places happening and creeping up, unfortunately.
Ages and stages, when they're young and elementary school age, They need to understand what it is to play with others and share things and learn from others. As they get into middle school age, they start to try things out. They have more of a sense of the world as opposed to just themselves. And they need to work to understand their world in relation to others. And as they get to high school, they do a little more trying things out and, trying to feel what it is to be more grown up and more adult, but still in a childlike way. And it's important to allow them to they've been missing out on some of those interactions and the opportunities to share and grow and make mistakes.
Well, they're still making some mistakes, but so am I, so I can't. I think it was interesting. I was a little I had a lot of thoughts about to what degree my children would have the ability or the influence over the decision around vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking to some colleagues, I said, as a parent, it's, it is our responsibility to make those decisions for our children. We legally have that. I said, however, I think most of us can appreciate that sometimes it's a lot easier to make decisions when they agree with you, especially when they're in their teen years. And so I was really curious to see how my own children would respond to, the opportunity to be vaccinated, and how other families are kind of navigating those conversations. What advice, would you give to, parents in terms of how to have and how to navigate that conversation with their kids?
Asking them if they have any questions about the vaccine is really a good place to start, because then you can get an idea of what they've heard and what they're curious about, what they're worried about. But most of what I've seen also is that kids see it as a way to get back to their regular life, a little bit more interaction. They miss their friends. They miss, being able to do things outside of the house, and they miss having the freedom to move about, and allowing them to have time to, get their questions answered. And if you don't know the answer, you can certainly reach out to some trusted sources, like the health department website has lots of resources for you to reach out and talk. You can speak with their pediatrician. You can ask your own doctor. But most of the information has been out there a while. It's not any different for adolescents. They found the same sort of side effects for kids as they did for adults. And, they have 1 to 2 days of achiness, low-grade fever, and body aches and fatigue. So it's pretty similar if you got vaccinated to what they will experience. So you can say, this is how I felt when I got vaccinated. And I find that kids tend to share their experiences online a lot. And they're saying, well, I felt like this. And how did you feel at 5 o'clock? At 5 o'clock, I felt like this. So they're usually.
And they can actually track, like I know a lot, like my kids, I had them like download the VSafe, the symptom tracker, so they could actually put that in there, and they kind of thought it was cool because it was actually like building a data set, so to speak.
And then VSafe checks up on them to make sure they're okay, so that's good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I have heard a lot of parents say is, they prefer to take their children, or they'd like to take their children to like the pediatrician or to their regular, provider. But like one parent I spoke with was concerned, like they didn't have to do it multiple times, right? Like they needed to go in for a well visit and get other vaccines. Can we do it all at once? Like, will I be able to, like in the fall, can I get my flu shot? And my God, like how does that work? Can we do more than one thing at a time?
Usually we can, and the vaccine, she's got this lovely, very busy slide up here
Yes.
with all the vaccinations. Um, and we try to schedule them all together generally. But with COVID-19, they usually recommend that you don't do a vaccine 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. One of the reasons why they're doing that is that they want to make sure that the side effects or symptoms that you're getting are trackable and something that we can report as only related to the COVID-19 vaccine. Because we are still gathering information to make sure that we can make, especially for children, the best immunization schedule possible. And so the more information we gather now, the easier it will be a year from now, 2 years from now, to figure out when the best time in their development will be to put the COVID-19 vaccine in there so that it doesn't have any problems with any other vaccines.
So you mentioned in terms of like side effects and adverse reactions, the like normal, what would be considered normal reactions, maybe not adverse, but the normal reactions. So pain, fatigue, headache, things like that. One of the things we've experienced in our clinics is we've seen more young people who are experiencing, like once they've been vaccinated, they are actually fainting or nausea. Is there like a biological reason why we've seen it more with our young adults being vaccinated than we did with our older adults?
Yes, their immune systems are pretty robust. They also tend to get more worried or concerned when they're about to be vaccinated. And hyperventilation syncope is a real thing. I've seen lots of people pass out in my career, whether they're grown men or they're adolescents. But anywho, the one of the things is telling them what's going to happen and reassuring them of what the process is. It is slightly more common for younger people to pass out from vaccinations than for older people.
So I think it probably would be helpful to think about like ways to maybe minimize stress, knowing what to expect when they walk into a clinic, or the kindness of the vaccinators. I think we've definitely tried to like work with our nurses, at least through the health department. I think they've done a wonderful job. We've actually done so now. If you go to one of the health department clinics, you'll meet a giant 6-foot inflatable T-Rex meant to totally distract them from from being anxious or being nervous, and snacks and other things there to kind of help calm people. But it's definitely something I think that like the more people are aware, the more they know, the less anxious they are about it. I think the fear of the unknown is a pretty common thing for sure for many of our young people and even the adults. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what other than the fear factor, which I think is a very real factor, what are some of the barriers or some of the reasons that you're hearing from patients about their own choices, but then the choices that they may be making for their families?
Well, the biggest one I don't think is on this slide, except for under poor understanding of the importance of the value of vaccination. But it's social media and what has been coming into the information that's being pushed to people about misinformation about, for example, infertility. They just published a study about the vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and there were, they did about 3,000 people, and they looked for signs of the vaccine in follicles, in the eggs, and in the ovaries, and they looked in the reproductive liquid of the men, and they did not find it in either place. And they're doing ongoing studies with 36,000 healthcare workers, and in terms of no change in fertility, no problems getting pregnant, and they did find for protection for the babies, they found antibodies in the breast milk. So, if you're breastfeeding your child, you can protect them from COVID because if you've been vaccinated, because you can pass on the antibodies to your baby because we don't have vaccines for them yet.
Yeah.
And so there's still a population that's unprotected. And, they're not likely to wear masks either if they're, breastfeeding.
Well,
So,
it's interesting that you said that because I mentioned, I was one of the people that was sort of like I needed to be a better informed consumer when it came to the decisions I was making for my own kids. And I'll be honest and say sort of fertility and the future. But one of the things that for me personally definitely did influence my decision is learning that the mRNA vaccines, like the Pfizer nor the Moderna, they don't change DNA. That was huge for me because I was like, well, wait a minute, they don't. Okay, how does this work more? And that was actually a big decision point for me.
Your body less than 24 hours, they disappear, and that's it. It's just a recipe for the spike protein that gets presented on the cells so that your own immune system can look at the protein that's on the top of the cell and says, ooh, that's not us, and that's foreign, that's an enemy, and we're going to make antibodies and make a memory so that we can attack it in the future. And that's all it is. And then it's gone from your body and it doesn't do anything else. The side effects and issues that are coming up are related to people's own immune systems that rev up and cause problems.
What about, I know there was a question in the chat about ingredients, and what do you sort of tell children, are in the different vaccines? I know along that line, there's a lot of parents who have questions because, for example, they may have children with severe food allergies or other allergies. I myself am somebody who's a highly allergic person. And, I was able to take the vaccine. They did watch me for 30 minutes instead of 15. They watch everybody for 15. I got to stay for 30, but
if you're a person who carries an EpiPen, then all vaccination sites have them. And if you're a person with allergies, they will have that available for you. But to your point about what's in it, like I said, it's a little protein recipe. For the mRNA vaccines, that's Pfizer and Moderna, it's wrapped in a layer of fat, a lipid layer, which is the polyethylene glycol. That's the one that some people have the allergy to. But it's the same stuff in ultrasound gel. It's the same stuff that is in a lot of different lotions and creams and shampoos that we use. So if you had an allergy to polyethylene glycol, you would probably know about it by now. And most people are not allergic to it. We've vaccinated hundreds of millions of people with very few allergic reactions.
What about people that are not allowed to get or have been told not to get the flu shot or to have the flu shot in their allergist office? Is there any kind of egg or?
Nope, there is nothing related to that. The mRNA vaccines are pretty clean. And if you have food allergies, it usually is not a problem at all. And then in addition to the recipe protein, the lipid layer, there's salts and sugars, and that's it. There is no animal products. There's no fetal tissue. There's nothing except the protein, a little bit of fat, salt and sugar, and that's it.
I know that when the vaccine availability was much more limited, people didn't necessarily have a choice and were often told, get what you can, the first one that's available to you. I do know now through the health department, at least when we have our small clinics, we actually are trying to the best of our ability to offer choice to people, because I know that some people definitely have personal reasons and concerns for why they may or may not want different things. I have a friend who was absolutely like, I will do whatever it takes to get J&J because I do not want to get more than one shot. She has a very severe needle phobia, and that to her was, she's like, I want the vaccine, but I only want one. But I've also have friends who on the same level have equally said, no, I specifically want this one, and here are my reasons why. Most importantly, I think, is that they're all making a choice to be vaccinated, which I, commend them for. But we do have the opportunity to have a little more choice now than certainly happened at the beginning. So I know for some people that's definitely a shift, because we were so incredibly limited at the beginning of all of this.
But to finish the answer to your question, for the J&J vaccine, what's in it is an inactivated cold virus with the recipe for the spike protein for coronavirus. And that's about it. And salts and sugars.
Yeah. So, and you actually just answered that that it's like you read the chat and it just appeared what was in the J&J. So, and you answered it right there. Amazing. So I think a couple other things, that I know we've talked about just in respect to kids. And I think, we're certainly focusing a bit more of our conversation around maybe children on the more adolescent end of childhood, because right now the vaccine is approved for those that are 12 and up. But definitely the range of developmental stage between a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old or 16-year-old it's vast. But I think some of the really important things that we probably all need to keep in mind about communicating with them. We've actually, it's been interesting. We talked a little bit about the experiences in the clinic with the syncope and things like that. One of the other things that we've experienced is this sense of everyone is watching me. Everyone wants to know what I'm doing, or they're all sort of focusing on me. And so what has been really interesting is watching where adults were like all over the selfies, like, let me take my COVID selfie, let me take my vaccine selfie. Young people are not necessarily gravitating towards that. And in particular, the settings where it's a really large, like the mass vac sites, it's interesting to sort of see the reaction that they have. So I think, you mentioned some really important things about kind of giving them concrete information about what to expect, answering the questions that they have. But I think as parents, we probably all may need that reminder, may need to do the extra prayer of our own patience with them, and recognizing that the fear of needles, for example, or the fear of the unknown is very real, just as it may have been for us, as it would be for them, and sort of practicing that patience, encouraging them. My young kids kind of got irritated with me. When you go for your appointment, most places actually will have you also schedule your second dose, and you have to use the little QR code and go through. Yeah. And my kids got mad at me because I was making them go in and do the QR code and schedule their own second dose. Granted, I was supervising them, but they had to go and fill out the form. And, I was actually stunned when one was like, maiden name, what's your maiden name? And I was like, okay, this is a good life skills. I'm glad that you're asking me what this is, and now and that there's a reason why they collect that information on the form. And we turned it into a learning experience. But I think as parents, just kind of being able to do that, but also paying attention to the cues and things that they have. I know we have had a lot of questions about, will vaccine be offered in the schools? And I think that, there's a lot of conversation right now about making sure that we are making plans for that. I know in Howard County, our children are able to receive the flu vaccine in schools. And so, trying to mobilize so that kids who may not be able to access the vaccine, in some of these sites, or maybe, for parents who are unable to take off work to get them. We are definitely working on that.
Is that we will have full approval of vaccines before the year is out for at least the Pfizer and the Moderna, because they came out earlier than the J&J. That's the only reason why they wouldn't be all at the same time. The difference between the emergency use and the full approval is usually time. You just need to have a little bit of time go by to, just finish out the normal course of monitoring vaccines once they're in the general population. So this is nothing new or unusual. And so Pfizer will be the first to be approved, Moderna will be approved after that, and J&J, just like they were when they came out. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was, why is it really important to do the vaccinations now? A lot of people had done the I want to wait and see. And we have a whole lot of variants. I know most people have seen what was going on in Britain and in India. And those huge spikes in disease were due to variants. The British version is 3 times more contagious than the original COVID-19 virus, and the Indian virus is 5 times more contagious than the original virus. And so you see people getting infected much more easily. You haven't had more death, slightly more hospitalization, but not more death. But more people are getting it, and the more people that get it, then the more variants we will get, because viruses mutate. That's what they do. The other thing that you should not wait for. So in other words, we have variants that make it more contagious, and that eventually, as we unmask and we start to move about, I'm still masked and my children are still masked, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon. Outside, I'm unmasked, but if there's any people around, I'm masked, even if I'm walking outside. But the thing that will be concerning, especially as we move into the fall, children go back to school, and we're inside a lot more, is if there are variants that are much more contagious or dangerous, then you can get COVID. And there are people who have gotten COVID even if they've been vaccinated. Now their symptoms are mild or they're completely asymptomatic. And I know I mentioned it last time that the endpoint of the studies was to make sure that they didn't get sick and they didn't die. And the vaccines are extremely effective at doing
Very
that.
effective at that, yeah.
As you can see across the country, our numbers are going down because more and more people are getting vaccinated. Howard County has knocked it out of the park with getting people vaccinated, and our numbers are below or around 1%, and that is so fabulous. But in order to keep it that way, as we start to travel and we do camps and sleepaway camps, and we see, family members that live across the country who are going to bring some other variant of COVID, then it's really important that we are vaccinated so that we aren't spreading. We have herd immunity. We're protecting the people who are vulnerable, like our people with autoimmune, our very young children, our seniors who haven't been able to make it out to get vaccinated yet, so that those people don't get this new variant from California or New York or Texas or Florida, right, and they do well. We don't want to be the instrument. Even if we got mildly sick, it felt like a cold to us because we got vaccinated, but we might take it to somebody who hasn't been vaccinated or can't be vaccinated and cause a problem for them. So that is the reason to get vaccinated now, and that is the reason to protect your loved ones and your children.
So I think there's a couple things that this brings up and some questions in the chat that relate to this. I think, we had a question about the traveling. And I think you touched on that, right? That, the more we move about the cabin, so to speak, and the more we move about places, the more risk there is. And so I think, we'll talk in a few minutes about sort of making some decisions about, risk and such. But what about our little ones? Like, what about the youngest? Like right now, 12 and up. But what does that mean for I shouldn't call them the babies, but for our littles, what happens? When will they be able to get vaccinated?
So before the end of the summer, like heading into the fall, I'm expecting maybe August or September that we might have, because the studies are ongoing. The kids are in the studies currently, and we should hear something about, as our numbers go down, it gets harder to enroll people, but um, we should hear something about it in the fall, like late summer, maybe September-ish for approval down to age 6.
Wow. Okay. So we're kind of doing this incremental.
Yeah, that's normal. That's
What's
how
the difference? Like, I mean, I guess in terms of the vaccine development,
well, it has to do with the younger you are, you have to work on dosing. So you figure out a dose for the adults, but then you have to figure out what's a good dose for a very little human. And so is it half the dose? Is it a third of the dose? And so they need to do the trials to find out which dose is effective in younger children who are smaller in size. And so they definitely will get less of a dose. The question is, what dose? And so that's why they need to do the studies in children. And so they get an idea, because, adolescents are almost full grown humans, right?
Right.
So they get the same dose as adults. So they're pretty easy. They just need to do safety studies for them. That's why it was able to get emergency use so quickly. But as you get smaller humans, then you have to decide, do you change the dose? And so those are the studies they're doing now.
So I would say, probably based on the timing that you're suggesting and just information, that we're sort of hearing and discussing, I think when you talk about what to expect for schools or, camps and things, I think right now, I know for the students that are back in school right now, masking is still required, both teachers and students. And it's really to protect those that are not vaccinated. And so I think we'll probably continue to see that, I would imagine, especially at like the elementary level or other points in time, like even into the fall. That's probably going to be necessary, I would imagine, because we are not able to vaccinate them. But I think that's probably more to come. But the exciting part is they will be back in a building most likely. So that's a really good thing.
That is the general plan, yes.
One of the questions I've heard people ask, and I've actually heard people who are just in the series and getting vaccinated now, I even ask, is what about booster shots? And I know more is starting to come out about that. From what I understand, it's likely that there will be booster shots. We just don't necessarily know when, but most likely kind of that 8 to 12 month.
Well, actually, probably longer than that. They expect that the mRNA vaccines will last much more than a year. We're a year out from the original studies, and they are still having immunity and a good, robust immune response from the original studies that started late October, early November of 2020. So, I'm sorry. They started March of 2020. That's when the vaccine came out, in December of 2020. But the study started March and April of 2020. And so we are now a year out from that, and they are still having robust immunity. But if you think about it, if you think about your tetanus shot, right? People say, oh, if you step on a rusty nail, you should go get a tetanus shot. And you typically should get them every 10 years. And if you haven't done it, you should probably do it. Anyway, you should typically get them every 10 years. And I expect that the immunity that lasts from mRNA, if we didn't have the variants, would be that long. The problem, of course, is that viruses mutate.
That's what they do best.
Right, that's what they do. And there will be new strains that we need to protect against. So far, all the variants, our vaccines are effective against them. We have not lost immunity to any of them, including the new Indian variant, the South African variant, the Brazilian variant, the British variant, and the United States variants. It's effective against all of them. However, at some point, inevitably there will be a mutation and it will no longer be effective. At that point, we need a booster. So just by itself, the likelihood is that the vaccine would last for years and years. But because of the variants, we will need boosters.
So, I mean, there's lots of things to unpack there. And I think one of the, kind of going back, kind of taking it back out of the booster space, but kind of going back to the travel. My mind is thinking summer. Sorry, I'm on vacation, Dr. Cragen. I'm like ready to go on a trip.
Sounds great.
So, we talked about like making choices and planning and thinking ahead. I fully appreciate how difficult it can be when, you're going to be traveling and visiting people and, some are vaccinated, some aren't vaccinated.
Right.
You've got
So
littles, you've got olders.
Right. Traveling by yourself as an independent adult, you just have to worry about yourself and who are you going to be exposed to. So I'm going to do them first, and then I'm going to do some of the family dynamics, right? But it's easier if you're doing one person to explain some.
I kind of do want to run away by myself a little bit. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother conversation.
It's easier to explain the risks if it's one person. So you, Kelly, are going to go on a trip, right? The question is, are you going to a place that has the same level of infection as you have at your house? Or are you going someplace like South Africa or Brazil? You're going to do that kind of traveling, right? Where they don't even have vaccines yet. Or they're just starting to get them and less than 5% of the population is vaccinated. So that would be a high risk travel because, you're going to be around people who almost certainly are not vaccinated. And there's a high level of infection where you're going. So if you were going instead to Connecticut, where, it's lower and their vaccination is high, then you're not going to be at increased risk. You can move about and feel a little more comfortable because you're vaccinated, having food at a restaurant because most of the people around you will probably be vaccinated. But if you go someplace like Texas or Florida, then, it's a crapshoot. You don't know. Are you going to go to that club? Are you going to go to, a movie theater? And places where people are wearing masks and you're wearing masks, you're much less likely to get infected at all. But if you are unmasked and you're around other people, how do you know whether they have COVID-19 or not? Because it's an asymptomatic disease sometimes, you don't know. There's no way.
A lot of places are going to do the, I've heard them talking about, not to cut you off, but the vaccine passports. I know I put a little thing in the chat box about where people can actually, because some people have like lost their card or wanted to know. And as a parent, it was a wonderful resource I wished I had known about a long time ago, which is where I could go find my kids' immunization records for sports camps and things.
That is very useful. Please tell me.
The MyIR website, you can actually, download immunization records. And if you need to, verify that you are vaccinated. But I've heard a lot of like back and forth about this whole passport idea and whether or not businesses or schools or other places could even ask that question.
Well, generally, if you are a private business, you can do what you want. So if you say that you don't want anybody who's not vaccinated to come in the door, then it's your business. You can say that. If it's a school or a government agency, it's going to be less likely that they would ever make that kind of mandate, just because they have legal ramifications and, all that other stuff. Once it becomes a fully approved vaccine, it might end up being in schools like the rest of the vaccines. At this point, they're not planning on mandating it because it's still an emergency use. The likelihood is that by fall, at least Pfizer will be approved. Moderna might be approved. So I don't know what school systems are going to do, and that's a state issue. So every state will be different, just like every state's rollout was different and every state's rules are different.
Yeah, well, I know University of Maryland system has said that they're going to require vaccine. And so that would be like College Park, Towson,
Yes, most
Toledo's,
universities are requiring vaccines.
but the public school, the
Mhm.
primary, secondary, it's a little bit different. So
Right. If you're going to live on campus, then they want you vaccinated. And yeah, most colleges and universities, not all of them, but most of them, which I'm very happy about because mine is going to college. But back to so now if you're going to travel as a family and you've got multiple age kids, then anybody
I can only imagine it would be like you have like one that like the ones that are totally can be maskless and are vaccinated, and then the little ones that aren't, and you're trying to be on a trip with all of them. Oof.
So not fair to the younger children. And that, my recommendation is that you decide as a family, we're all going to do this thing. And masking would be the recommendation that I would make for you. Just mask as a family if you're traveling, because you're traveling around people and you don't know what their status is, and you don't know whether they're going to infect you or not. And you have young children who you don't want to get sick. These are our precious gifts, and we need to protect them. So, but being on airplanes, being in mass transit situations, being in crowds, going to indoor events like restaurants and that kind of thing, you have to pay attention to, is there any ventilation around? Is there a way to get fresh air into an area? If there are people unmasked around you, then try to be where it's ventilated, and your risk goes down significantly. So, if people have certain scenarios that they want to type in the chat, then let me know. But hopefully that helps give you an idea of what kind of risks you might encounter.
I think something that all of this speaks to my heart with just the idea of how much we've all had to be able to like adapt and have things that could be difficult conversations. So this past weekend was the big meet the girlfriend's parents event for my oldest, my adult child. And, being able to navigate this situation with people we'd never met, and there was sort of this extra pressure of sort of who they were, and having that, are we masking? Are we not masking? Who's vaccinated? Who's not vaccinated? I think, those are real conversations that we all need to just sort of make kind of our standard fare, even if it may feel a bit uncomfortable.
Correct. My kids know that, I'm going to want to know the vaccination status of anybody that they're going to be around.
Yeah.
And, they're like, I'm sorry to ask you this, but my mother needs to know. And, they just know and they ask. And,
I feel like it's actually sometimes easier for the kids in a way than it is for us as adults, like having the conversation with other adults even. And now, that a lot of us in our workplaces are navigating it differently because workplaces can do things differently. All that to say, one of the things I, have put up on this and we'll just kind of like put it in the parking lot a little bit, which is that, these are real things and they all create anxiety. And as we re-enter the world in various ways, I think we're all going to be faced with sort of, hopefully we're all going to be really proud of some of the things that we've accomplished and the things that we've navigated, and, just even being able to have, difficult conversations or learn how to Zoom effectively. I mean, these are small but mighty successes for all of us, but not to minimize the fact that, we all are probably finding ourselves dealing with things in a different way, and none of us should have to do that alone. And so, I just want to put out for folks that, we do have wonderful resources here in Howard County through Grassroots, through Crisis Connect, 211 press 1. There's even a text crisis line. And especially for our young people, as they're navigating this and we talked about like sort of the isolation that they've faced. I think as adults we've faced it, but I can only imagine, middle school was difficult enough when I was like doing it in person, and that was what seems like 100 years ago, to be doing it behind a computer screen and missing so many of those other milestones.
remind people, I don't know, I don't know. Most people will remember 9/11 if you were around. And we went through extraordinary change and we didn't complain about it. There was no, backlash about it. Mothers who had young babies had to pour out their breast milk before getting on the plane because of concerns about safety threats. And, we just went along with it. Every time we went to go travel, there was a new rule. And, we just said, okay, that's what's going to happen when we travel. And this is the same sort of thing. It's kind of like in the 70s, there were no seatbelts, and now there are seatbelts. We use these to protect ourselves and to make sure that our lives are going to be safer. And that's what vaccines do. They help protect us from diseases, some of which no longer exist because of vaccines. When I was in training, we had whole floors dedicated to pediatric care. And now pediatric care is a small section of an adult ward. And there's only a few beds because so few kids are hospitalized in most areas of the country. In larger cities, of course, we have whole hospitals dedicated to peds, but there used to be peds wards in every hospital across the country, but vaccines have gotten rid of that. And so I just wanted to give a little historical perspective of where we were and
Yeah.
what we are capable of flexing to be able to do.
And we really are. I mean, to your point, we are incredibly capable. And I like to think about like this generation as, maybe they'll be known in the future as the most resilient generation. I think a lot of them have adapted and adjusted so remarkably. I mean, I know I've derived strength from my own children many times throughout this last, 15, 16 months. And just that they're still, one foot in front of the other and moving forward on many things. And I think that, just kind of reminding ourselves that, we are all dealing with a lot. And as parents, we're dealing with our things, and that is very true. We are also modeling for our young people how to deal with their things. And so just kind of thinking about, healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms and what we can do and sort of how we're modeling for them. And some days that'll be an easier feat than other days. Some days I will just admittedly say I have not worn my best momming. Other days, I think I have done pretty well. And I think, we all have to give each other sort of that grace and that space. But, there are lots of resources available, the numbers that we previously shared, but certainly through the health department, if you think, okay, maybe talking to somebody now will help us all, either, as a parent, as a family, for your child. I think those are all incredibly important, investments in our health. And really just thinking about like how to even connect with that. One of the resources I do want to share is something called Care App, which is a resource that we have in Howard County, and it's open to providers. It's open to individuals. Any of us can search it, and it's not just finding what we would normally consider like the health resources. It's really finding support for anything. I mean, if you're looking for support for food, you're looking for support for, jobs, you're looking for, any number of things are available in there. And so I just kind of encourage people to take a look and explore it, see how they feel, in what they're looking for. But it also can connect you to places to find, mental health counselors or other things. And I think certainly reaching out to your primary care physician, your pediatrician, those are wonderful starting points because, this has been a lot for everybody, truly. Dr. Kurgan, do you want to add anything or?
One of the things that I wanted to bring up was talking to your kids about, where they are and how they're doing and, what do they think about possibly going back to school in person and, plans for the summer and, just depending on age, of course, because, having a deep conversation with your 3-year-old is not very useful. But, if kids are really good at saying, I'm fine, nothing, just like adults are, and checking in with them and asking them questions that they cannot answer with a yes or a no is a really good thing to do. So that's it.
Definitely. So I know we've covered a lot of territory in in this short time. So I know we've kind of been monitoring the chat, but I certainly want to open up the floor to other people if there are questions that anybody has, sort of that maybe we didn't touch on or that we haven't answered.
I'm just checking to make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover. One last thing I did want to bring up was about pregnancy, not in relation to the vaccine, but in relation to the COVID-19 disease. And I've had conversations with lots of women who have been like, I'll wait until after pregnancy to get vaccinated. But as I shared earlier, getting vaccinated while pregnant protects the baby in that it does cross the placenta to give antibodies, and it can show up in breast milk. But for the pregnant women themselves, COVID-19 is kind of devastating in pregnancy. Pregnant women, because they're carrying a human, their immune system tends to turn down so that they don't reject the baby. And because of that, they are ravaged when they get the COVID-19 disease. And they tend to have things like increased risk of miscarriage or hospitalization, heart disease. And unfortunately, a lot of pregnant women pass away, and they might end up delivering their child, but then they don't live. And then, who's going to care for the child? It's been especially heart-wrenching. I have a lot of OBGYN friends who have just had the most horrendous year because, they managed to get the baby out and the baby's doing okay because the disease hasn't been passing on to the baby, just the good antibodies to protect them. But the moms haven't been doing okay. And I just wanted to encourage that, if you are thinking of getting pregnant or if you're already pregnant, protect yourself and protect your child. They say on the airplane, put your mask on first and then put it on your child, because, you pass out, you can't put it on your child and they can't do it for themselves. So.
Well, and I believe that one of the, you guys aren't done with us yet, unfortunately. We're like bad pennies, Dr. Cragen and I. We keep turning up. But I believe that next month we actually will have a special guest who's going to be talking, very familiar face, I believe, First Lady for St. John will be talking about pregnancy. And I think, we have a lot of questions and interesting, conversations. Because again, this is not, as much as I wish we could just say, oh, we've covered everything there is to cover. As we saw, every month there's like so much more. And I think COVID is probably going to be something that is part of our new reality in a lot of ways. And, even when it comes to, to thinking about what will school look like and what will our kids be experiencing next year. My 14-year-old actually made a comment. He was kind of saying that, he sort of hopes that next year, he feels like, well, I'll be in high school, so most people will probably be vaccinated, but I kind of hope that people wear masks, especially during like, the typical flu season and things like that. And, we may very well see, a new thing. It's not something that other countries and other parts of the world haven't been doing for a while. We may see, seasonal masking. We may see, different acceptance of people taking those personal protective measures, not only personal for protecting themselves, but personal in protecting the people that they care about and the people that are around them.
Yes, and I'm happy that people are washing their hands more often. And if handshaking goes away, I won't be sad about that.
I'm okay with the elbow bumping and the waving. And I have a good friend who, God bless her, she says she's not a hugger. I personally am kind of a hugger, but she's never been a hugger. She's like, this is like phenomenal. Nobody's touching anybody. So, but my kids, of course, tease me and say I've been training all my life for this because I've always been the mom that had the Purell in the car and the take your shoes off when you walk in the door and wash your hands first thing. And so I've always kind of been that way. But we're definitely a lot more enforcing of that in our home now. So,
Yes.
but I don't see any additional questions in the chat box. So I'm not sure, Reverend Ricky, if you had any other last minute thoughts, or if you wanted to. I mean, I personally would love it if you would lead us in a closing prayer to this wonderful event. Not to put you on the spot, sir, but
No, it would be my pleasure. First of all, thank you too for continuing to be informational for our church and our community. I want to just let you know that your work is so valuable. It is so needed. And no matter the varying responses that we get in human services industries, I want to affirm what you already know about your work. And that's that it really matters. It's really important. And I just want to say thank you to you too. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
I will absolutely close us in a word of prayer. I want to say thanks to everybody who's been viewing. Please click the share button. Let somebody know that this great information is housed here with St. John Baptist Church on YouTube and Facebook. And let's close in a word of prayer. Let's pray. Lord, we just thank you and praise you for the ability to learn and to grow. Thank you for the information that has been shared with us. Thank you for Dr. Cragen and for Kelly, who have shared the information that can help us to live lives that are whole and well. Lord, thank you that you're expanding the minds of our community and those part of our church to learn how to best care for ourselves in the days of COVID-19. Father, I thank you for the information about the vaccine. Bless the work that Dr. Cragen and Kelly are doing to educate the community. Thank you in advance that the fruit of this work will live beyond their days. And we praise you for this work. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. To all of our viewers, thank you for being here. Dr. Cragen and Kelly, thank you so much. And everybody have a great, great night. Take care.
Thank you.